over 24,000. So what they did was they replaced some of the tiles with these thermal blankets. A little bit about that. These thermal tiles down here, and of course they're on the bottom, they're the thickest ones, they're about 5 inches thick. They will absorb about 2,300 degrees Fahrenheit. Now these white ones up here will absorb about 1,200, and the thermal blanket's about 800 degrees. Now when you get on orbit, of course if you know anything about space, it's a pretty harsh environment. It's a vacuum, and if you have the direct radiation of the sun without going through an atmosphere like where we live, the temperatures can increase to 200 degrees Fahrenheit. They can increase to 93 degrees Celsius. Now on orbit, you're going to do 16 orbits around the Earth every day at 17,500 miles an hour. So 45 minutes you're in that direct heat, and then the other 45 you're in just the opposite cold. So this is one of the reasons they protect it with a thermal blanket, just to be able to protect the airframe itself, because of the fact that thermodynamics, when you heat something up and cool it down, it expands and contracts, and of course everything's going to get weak from those thermal dynamics. Now, these right here are the reaction control nozzles, and there are pods of these on the back we will see. They're not only operated by software input, but also the joystick from the pilot or the commander. Now these sets of pods in the back, when they come down through and they do the deorbit burn, they come back down through the atmosphere, those little thrusters will make sure they come down correctly. And also, when you're on orbit, they're going to make sure your pitch, yaw, and roll is correct on your orbit around the Earth as well. Now when you first get in space, these two little hatches open up. Behind there are little technical devices called star trackers. If you ever sailed on the ocean, I haven't, but I understand how it works. You get a sextant, you line it up with the stars, and it makes sure you're going in the right direction. That's what those do, although they're operated by software. There are two of them, because like your eyeballs, if you close one eye, you can't judge distance. So it's the two of them, so they can understand the distances where they are. Crazy, huh? Anyway, this right here is the only part that's pressurized. There are 3 levels here. There's the flight deck up here, there's a mid deck down in here, and the equipment bay on the bottom. Avionics and computers here, the kitchen's here, the bathroom's over here. But the important part is where the commander sits. Who's my commander today? You want to see where your commander sits? I gotta have somebody say there. Are you the commander, buddy?
I'll take it.
Okay, he's the commander. You can be the pilot, okay? Okay, the commander sits right here, and the pilot's going to be on that side. You're going to drop the landing gear when we come home. He's going to be responsible for the whole mission. He's going to make sure you know what you're doing, and he's going to make sure you do the right thing. But it's going to be the commander, then you over here as the pilot, then the flight engineer, and then a 4th seat behind the pilot. That could be a mission specialist. They could be doing experiments in the back payload. They could be operating the Canadarm, or they could be doing spacewalks. They're trained for something. Now, if there are 7 people on this mission, let's say I'm one of them, and we already got the flight deck taken up, I'm going to have to be down here, where the 3 other astronauts are going to be. Not as good a view there. You're on the flight deck as a pilot and a commander. Of course, you got all these windows. You get to see everything really nicely. But anyway, the Canadarm operations are on this back wall. You saw that in the presentation. Down here is where you get in. This is where you do all your business. This is where they do all the filming of somersaults, playing with their food, sleeping, and going to the bathroom. Down here is where the fuel cell technology is, where they use liquid oxygen, liquid hydrogen to create electricity. The byproduct is pure water. And going into space, to put 1 pound of anything in space on an orbiter was $10,000. So they took all the water out of the food and they would rehydrate it from that pure water from the fuel cell system. Now, is anybody from Canada by any chance? No Canadians. Canada? No, Canada? No? Okay. Well, the Canadian Space Agency was started, years ago, and they wanted to be part of our program. And they said, look, we know you guys want to make a remote maneuvering system. Eventually, they named it the Canadarm because they wanted to build that. So they said, we are going to use our engineering prowess and our manufacturing technique and your engineering prowess with astronauts, mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, and so forth. And we're going to build it for you to specifications you provide, and we're going to pay for all the resources to provide it, and we're going to give it to you for free, and all you have to do is put our name on it. And that's what happened. We got the Canadarm, the first one for free. There are 2 on the International Space Station. Canadarm 2, they're a little bit different, but it's just like a regular arm. It's got a shoulder, an elbow, a wrist, and then the hand action. Now where the hand is, there is a video camera in there. But you look at that and you say, what could that possibly attach to? How does it operate? There's cables in there, and it makes a circular move, and it attaches to one of these right here. If you go back and see the Hubble model, you see a few of those on there. Any satellite that was deployed, let's say they're orbiting the Earth, they pull the satellite out, it's held up by one of those, and then they just release it, and there it would be on its orbit. But the Canadarm, a lot of people think it's hydraulic and be able to lift a lot of weight, but it can only lift 25 pounds or about 10 kilograms. Let's face it, when you're in space, you're on the mid-deck, and you touch this wall like that with your finger, you know where you're going, right? You're going to that wall, because there's nothing that's going to stop you. You don't wear your shoes on the orbiters because you never touch the floor. You're only on missions for about 14 days, the longest, and that's how that worked. But anyway, you can see the Canadarm would be operated. You can see these windows they would use. Now, one of the first things as well, like I said, the Star Tracker windows will open up when they get on orbit. Also, these payload bay doors. They immediately open those up because this is like a radiator on your car. There are all kinds of tubing in there. R21 refrigerant, which is really bad for the ozone. We don't use it anymore, but initially when we were doing this program, we were using R21. The tubing would go into the avionics and computers on the mid-deck to keep them cool, to keep them operating effectively. Now the payload bay is just about the size of a school bus, 60 feet by 15 feet. It'll fit Hubble, of course, and Hubble was deployed a little over 35 years ago on Discovery. But Atlantis had a big part of repairing it. They had to repair it. Now this is the airlock right here. If you're going to do a spacewalk, which I would have loved to have done, put on your suit in the mid-deck, open up the hatch, come in here, close the hatch, depressurize, you come out and do your walk. If you're attached to the International Space Station, that's the attachment. You could freely go from the mid-deck right to the International Space Station. No problem. You didn't have to have a spacesuit. Now the European Space Agency also had a part of our program as well. And they built what was known as Space Habitat. And there were 2 sections to it. You could put one section, which would be one half of the payload bay. It was basically a microgravity experiment laboratory. It would attach right to that area right here. So they could put their microgravity experiment payloads right in there, get them set up, put the whole thing in there. Then when they got up to space, they could do their experiments. And of course, being attached to here, the mid-deck, they could flow freely back and forth. And that's what they did before the International Space Station was built. Now, Atlantis had a big part of building the International Space Station as well. It's been almost 25 years that not everybody born on Earth has been here together, because there's always been somebody on the space station for the last 25 years. Crazy, huh? Anyway, let's go talk about the propulsion system. You came up under the shuttle stack, the 2 solid rocket boosters, and the external tank, like I say, is orange now, or was orange, because they saved the paint weight. Now the external tank has liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen, and that is the fuel for the RS-25 engines on the back of the orbiter. The solid rocket boosters are going to provide about 80% of the propulsion to get them about halfway to space. But in the presentation, you saw that 6.6 seconds, liquid oxygen, liquid hydrogen would ignite these 3 engines. They each make about 500,000 pounds of thrust. So they vector them at first to make sure they work, then they ignite them at 6.6 seconds. 500,000 pounds each, or 1.5 million pounds total. The orbiter on the pad, fully fueled, is 4.5 million pounds. So these 3 engines are ready to go. They count down to 0 in the solid rocket boosters. If you noticed outside, they had these huge bolts on there. Those stainless steel bolts, but they're very critical in this mission. When they count down to 0 and the solid rocket boosters go off, computer signal goes to them. There's an explosive charge on the side of the nuts. The nuts are split in half and you're on your way. Each one of those makes 3 million pounds of thrust, and when that thing goes off at 0, one thing is guaranteed. You're not staying here anymore. You're leaving. Hopefully you're going to space because that's your intended target, but for 2 minutes those will burn. The Kármán line is 62 miles. It will get you 30 miles up, or 100 kilometers, so it'll get you about 50 miles up. Of course, the atmosphere is much thinner. Gravity is not as strong. Then they would expand, little solid rocket boosters ignite, explosive bolts on those. They would drop down into the ocean and parachute into the ocean. We would recover and reuse them. Then for 6.5 minutes, the external tank would provide the fuel to get the orbiter up into space. I did mention 17,500 miles an hour is the magic number to stay on orbit. For the Europeans here, it's 28,000 kilometers an hour. That is the number you have to achieve. If you go too fast, you're going to do an elliptical orbit. If you go too slow, gravity's going to affect it and you're coming home. So in the presentation, if you went through there, you saw the external tank expended. It burns up through the atmosphere. And then you saw the clipboard with a tethered pen on it, and they said, Endeavour Houston, we see a nominal MECO, main engine cutoff. You've achieved your speed, you're on orbit. OMS 1 not required. The orbital maneuvering system thrusters are these, and that's what you're going to use to come home to slow you down. Welcome to space. Then what happened? Inside there, you're on the flight deck, you can see all the switches and everything going on, and you're spinning. It's like, what's going on? You're turning around, flying backwards and upside down. The payload bays are obviously opening as well, and they face the Earth. So these engines here with no more fuel, these are going to catch orbital debris if there's any in that case, and of course to protect the housing where the astronauts would be. Now in the end of the presentation you saw the orbiter itself. You could see the bottom of it. You saw those two orbital maneuvering system thrusters right here. This thing would have been upside down. You can see the bottom of it, and they're coming to you. And Fred Gregory calls up to John McBride, and he said, Atlanta, Houston, go for deorbit burn. And they fire those up. Of course, the payload bay doors are closed. Everything's ready to go. It's all secure. And John McBride says, we copy you, Fred. We're on our way down. It's all packaged, ready to go. And then it turns around and starts coming through the atmosphere at a 40-degree angle. Now, if you're coming to this runway, which is 15,000 feet long, or 5,000 meters, one of the longest in the world, you're going to line up in Australia. You're going to do the deorbit burn there, and then you're going to come through the atmosphere about 45 minutes, or about 5,000 miles through the atmosphere to slow you down. Then in the presentation, like you saw, you heard the two sonic booms, because they're coming back through the atmosphere so quickly, those sonic booms follow behind them. And then you saw the orbiter making a steep rounding turn. If you came here on an aircraft, you land at about 3 degrees. The orbiter attacks the runway at 17 to 19 degrees because you only have one shot at it. You're making that sweeping turn, you're trying to find the lead edge of the runway, attack it, nose up, and you're going to land. The first 9 missions of the orbiters landed at Edwards Air Force Base because they basically have an unlimited runway in the desert. They wanted to practice to make sure they could correctly land on here. So the missions were, first 9 ended up in California. Because let's face it, if you miss this runway, you know what's lined up out there, right? Big gators. But anyway, that's what it took to come home. Now the landing gear, when they did deploy, they hit the runway so fast at 320 miles an hour, about 480 kilometers an hour. It's twice as fast as landing an aircraft. So when they hit the runway, they were not moving. So they would scuff so bad, they would only use them once for the rear landing gear, the rear tires. The front they would use twice, because by the time they slowed down a little bit, they weren't so abrasive on it. But of course, inside the presentation, they talked about the silica foam tiles. and they needed a more reusable, lightweight solution. And they took silica, which is a very abundant material on Earth. It's also called beach sand. But silica dioxide, the pure form of silica, is what they used. They made a cotton candy filament. They made blocks of it. They heat treated it. They would cut it up to the size. When we come down here, we look at it. I did talk about Columbia and Houston having over 29,000. This one has 24,177. But if you look right here, that one right there, these right here, that one there, these right over here, they would replace 100 to 125 of them every mission. Whether they were damaged or there was something wrong with it, they did not seal up right, they would always replace it. Of course, they're managed and cataloged, and every single one has a very specific location. Now, a lot of people will ask, why are they so small? Well, why did they put them in a diamond-shaped pattern like that? Why didn't they put big sheets of them in there? Put them on there, would have been more effective, quicker to put the whole process together. Well, it goes back to thermodynamics like I talked about it first. Expansion and contraction. Each of those tiles will expand and contract a minute amount. Each one has a little expansion joint between them so they stay intact. That's why they're like that. If you look at the dot on there, there's a little dot on each one. That's because during the Columbia Challenger initial program, if they got wet, they realized that they weren't effective in doing their job. So those little dots is where they would stick like a hypodermic needle with a chemical, and they would put that chemical in there and it would displace all the water effectively. So that's why there's a little dot on there. But why is it in a diamond-shaped pattern?
Oh,
When they
okay,
put
okay.
it into the wind tunnel test, they put it through the vacuum test. They put the heat to it like it was coming home. They realized that the diamond-shaped pattern would effectively make the heat dissipate off the wings much more efficiently. And you can see it right there, how right there the lead edges came off much better. And then following down through. And that's why they did that. Now this here is where the external tank was mounted, so it was ideal for us to mount it with that, because let's face it, the external tank and the integrity of there, being able to take all that thrust and go onto orbit, was perfect for us to mount it here. And I want to say they mounted it on a very peculiar angle. They drove it in here flat. They made very specific jacks. There was a specialized company that built jacks to jack it up to this angle, 43.21 degrees. And why do you think they chose 43.21 degrees? 4, 3, 2, 1. We have liftoff. Now, is anybody living in Broward County like I do? We call this the Space Code. When you go back to Cocoa Beach or wherever you go and you order pizza tonight, you're going to realize that our area code is 321 because we're the Space Coast. Now, right there is the slide that's depicted at a 22-degree angle. Kids love it. Take off your shoes and fly down like you're landing. Shuttle launch experience is right here. They're open until 5 o'clock. There was a lot of input by real astronauts to develop the shuttle launch experience. They wanted to make it as realistic as possible. The process is precisely what it's like. You just will not feel the 3 Gs of when the solid rocket boosters go off. You won't feel that 3 times weight on you. Like, go through the shuttle launch experience. I know Guy Gardner is still here.